In algebra, it's very important to be able to translate expressions. And what that means is you need to be able to take a sentence, a math sentence, and change it from words into a math problem so that we can solve it. We do a lot of this when we're looking at word problems, and we need to change that word problem into a mathematical sentence to be able to solve it. And so whenever we're trying to translate expressions, the first thing that we need to look for is a key word in that sentence that's going to tell us what operation we're trying to do. So if I'm looking at this first one up here, it says a number minus 6. The key word in this sentence is minus. And we need to know that the word minus means subtract. In math class today, you did a little, you might have done a worksheet, you might have done a little booklet, something that you learned all the different words and what operation they went with. So you'll want to have that handy as we're going through this if you're not sure what those words stand for. But in this case, minus means subtract. And now it says a number minus 6. So in this case, we're going to start with a number. We're going to call it n because it's a number. You can call it whatever letter you want it, whatever variable you want it to be. But we have a number minus 6. So we're going to subtract 6. That's what that problem looks like in a mathematical sentence versus just words, n minus 6. So looking at this next one, it says the sum of 3 and a number. And my key word in this one is sum. Sum means add. And so now it says the sum of 3 and a number. Well, okay, so it says sum of 3, so we need to start with 3, and we need to add on a number. I'm just going to keep using n because it's just a number. You can use whatever variable you would like, 3 and a number. In this next case, it says a number divided by 2. Obviously, the word divided by means divide, so we're going to be using division in this one. Now that we're working in algebra, we don't often use division this way unless we're working with order of operations. We usually write it as a fraction, and that fraction bar means division. So we can write it either way, but in algebra, we usually write it as a fraction with a fraction bar. So we have a number, and we're going to divide it by 2. All right, so we have a number, don't know what it is, that's what our variable is, and we're going to divide it by 2. So it looks just like that. Or if I wanted to write it with our regular division symbol, it would look like that, a number divided by 2. This next one is a little bit trickier, just in how it's wrote down and how we're going to write it. It says 9 less than a number. Our key words in this one is less than, and we know that less than means subtract. Now here's where it gets tricky. We can't always just write it down from left to right, because in this case we have 9 less than a number. Well, before we can figure out what 9 less is, we need to know what that number is. So we need to start with that number, but we don't know what it is. That's our variable, so we're going to start with 10. Now we need 9 less than that number, so we're going to subtract 9 from it. This is the only time that it really gets confusing is with subtraction, making sure that we're writing it down in the right order. So really be careful when you're reading these sentences that what you're reading and how you wrote it is the same thing. 9 less than a number, always think of what am I starting with. Can I take 9 away if I don't know what I started with? No. So we need to start with that number, then subtract 9. This next one says a number times 6. Times means multiply, so I'm going to use my multiplication sign. Or now that we're working a lot with algebra, that looks a lot like an X. So we can use a dot, we can use parentheses, or we can just put our number and our variable right next to each other. That also means multiplying. So we'll just write it each way so you can see what it looks like. But it's a number times 6. All right, so we have a number, and we're going to times it by 6. We have a number, and we're going to times it by 6. We have a number, and we're going to times it by 6. The only one that we're going to write differently is when we put the number and the variable right next to each other. Whenever we have a number and a variable right next to each other, we always write the number first and the variable second. This makes it more organized that way. Everyone writes it the same way. Kind of like order of operations, we're all doing it the same. So whenever a number and a variable are next to each other, we put the number first and the variable second. This next one says a number increased by 8. The word increased means add, so we'll have our addition sign. And we're going to have a number, and we're going to increase it by 8. All right, so let's take a number, and we're going to increase it or add it to 8. So a number plus 8. We'll try these last two, make sure we got it all figured out. Here we have the word quotient. The word quotient means divide. Again, when we're doing division, we're going to write it using that fraction bar. So the quotient of 14 and a number. So we have 14 and a number. In this case, thinking about what comes first, what comes second, it says the quotient of 14 and a number. I'm going to write it from left to right because we're going to start with 14 and we're going to divide it by some number. And then here's our last one, product. Remember, just like this one, product means multiply. And I'm just going to write it like we would for algebra. And so I'm going to write it just with the number and the variable next to each other. So that would be the product of 5 and n. Remember, whenever we're writing a variable and a number next to each other, we write the number first and the variable second. The biggest piece of translating expressions is first making sure you know what operation you're using. So always look for that keyword, underline it if you need to. Look on your sheet, look on your papers to figure out what operation that goes with. Once you have that figured out, make sure you know what you're starting with in that problem. Are you starting with the number they give you, or are you starting with the number that you're looking for? That'll tell you if you're going to be writing your variable first or your number first, especially when we're working with subtraction.